Just want to share an explanation that Valérie Pécard expressed 2 days ago in a very long post. I'll try to express it, although it may oversimplify, and to get your reaction to that in terms of the question, why is Trump doing what he is? And he speculates that Trump is more worried about China than he is worried about Russia. And he wants to drive a wedge between Russia and China. Ukraine is a very inconvenient fact for doing so. And he therefore would like to open up to Russia so that they do not join or bolster or make China stronger in its competition with the United States. What do you think?
I think that's one of the most rational things I've heard. That's definitely a possibility. I would love to think that Trump is rational, that there's a plan here. I just don't think there is.
We were trying to get also the logic of it, but at the same time, from our perspective, there is also other logic in other way of action, probable, and from our perspective, much more successful and effective. That if we assume, and we know that because Americans were talking about China for years, this is not the new thing, that China is on the top of the priority. However, at the same time, China is much more complex threat for the freedom world, free world, like assuming that we are calling this group of people like democracies. Because Russia is aggressor, is a threat for the global order, but at the most important threat for the Ukrainians. But we need to look at the bigger picture. But actually it has two leverage, the most important. The aggressive actions, military aggressive action, including the threat of the nuclear power, and the energy. That was the main leverage that Russia has. But when you look at the China, you will see much more complex leverage on US, Canada, Europe, and others. So we were thinking in the very logical way to whom we should first, or we have much more leverage to show to China through Russia. Because if we stop Russia in Ukraine and in the global scale, China will not act to us in much more complex way, to which the coupling which will be not possible in the short term. And we in Europe, we decrease our energy dependence from Russia. But we are struggling with what Russia is good in from the Soviet time, with the psychological operations. And this is something that Russia is using, and also is using the peace propaganda, and we can talk about it. But exactly, if we want to challenge China, and we need to go it from Russia, not through European Union or Canada to affect allies. Thanks.
So we have a question online, and it's for Ms. Legucka. The question is from Vic. Does the existence of relatively large ethnic Russian populations in Latvia and Estonia pose special challenges for countering Russian information/influence strategies?
I think I answered that question in my presentation. If not, maybe I will clear it up. That it is sometimes challenge from the overview, or only part of those Russian minorities, if we can call them as a minority, is a challenge for those countries, because the majority of them still believe that they need to defend the internal integrity of those countries. So it's much more complex group of people, not only those who are Russia would call it fifth column in the Baltic states. Their reactions is different to Russian invasion, but some of them, yes, they are challenging for those countries. Thanks.
I have the question for Dr. Legucka and Dr. Oates. For Dr. Legucka, what is the role in Russian disinformation on amplifying the historical tensions between Poland and Ukraine so that people get distracted and do not focus on the history centennial of our partnerships? What is the role, and how do we counter that both on the state level and on the day-to-day interaction and education piece? And for Dr. Oates, my question is, well, we've talked about Trump, and we all know that we have to respect democracy and work was no matter who is the elected leader, but where do we draw this line? When do we lose hope for partnerships between US and Ukraine? Because we're not at the point yet. The United States are a big supporter, and we need to be able to find the workarounds to still get aid for Ukraine. But at which point do we draw the line? Thank you.
Maybe my answer would be simple, but it is not this simple answer. I would say that we need to resolve our historical issues between ourselves. That will not be an instrument of dividing us and showing each part of this argument as a better or worse or disrespectful and etc. Now we have the question which raised recently on exhumation. I know that there is a process between Polish and Ukrainian, not only historians, because I'm not on the position that we need to leave history behind because we have much more urgent questions, because all the time that we did that, because the historical issues between Polish and Ukrainian societies are very long. And since 90s, I was also present in many conferences, and that kind of panels were like, sitcom or tragic sitcom, or it was very difficult to observe. Thinking that we can leave history to historians will not work, because all the time that came up with the different things, what was something going on between Poland and Ukraine, or Russia were using it. I'm not saying that only Russia, but internal groups of politics are using that kind of things, and then it's fueled by Russia, etc., because Russia all over the world, they are not inventing problems, they are fueling problems that we have in our societies. So that's why we need to resolve it first. And exhumation, I hope that it will work on the proper way, because this is something that Poles do not understand why there is no answer for. And on the other side, also Ukrainians does not understand anything, lots of things that we are doing. So resolving the problems is the first thing between ourselves, not to be, divided from outside.
Students always ask the best questions, and that's a great question. So where to draw the line? I think that's going to be a difficult question for Zelensky and his administration moving forward. The good news is, Trump might change his mind tomorrow. And as my slide suggested, he may just be punking us. I don't think he really knows I know he doesn't know what he's doing, and I feel very confident saying that when it comes to negotiating with Russia. Reference Yalta. Americans in general maybe don't know what they're doing, but particularly Trump. I think you draw the line when Ukraine makes a decision about the horrific human cost of the war, and when you're willing to say, this compromise works. The problem is any treaty they make with Russia won't be honored. So it's just a little bit of a catch-22. There's still a lot of impetus for Ukraine to keep fighting. But saying that, would I send my son to the front tomorrow? It's a very difficult thing. I actually sat next to two Canadians talking about how they were worried their sons would have to go into the military if America attacked. And I thought, that's not a conversation I've ever overheard in a Nando's. So yeah, he says a lot of stuff, right? Is America going to attack Canada? No, I feel confident on that one.
My question will be how all of us and every of us can contribute to stopping sharing this anti-Ukrainian legitimization of this absolutely illegal narratives of Russian regime here, especially in Canada, in such a vulnerable media ecosystem that is very dependent on the US narrative. We have here a lot of esteemed professors, NGOs, probably someone from government is here, I really hope. What can we do to defend our narratives basically here?
Just sitting here today, someone made a comment, they don't want to hear what we want to say, right? They're not hearing us when we say, no, Russia's the aggressor, no, NATO did not cause the invasion of Ukraine. The social scientists need to figure out better ways to build bridges and communicate with people who are believing the disinformation. I think we need to stop worrying about probably anyone in this room who can understand and process and has that ability, right? But we've got to find some way in my country to get to people who are believing this narrative because it's very, very dangerous, or any of the other narratives that are being pushed by the Trump administration, which are patently untrue. As an academic, I think that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to stop kind of complaining and documenting, and I'm going to start trying to think about what are the levers we can push to reach those people who are most affected.
Question on fighting disinformation in a democracy. You use the example of strong anti-vax messages from Russian propaganda in the States, but yet those are also messages from legitimate American politicians.
Like our Secretary of Health, yeah.
The one with the worm in his... yeah, exactly. So how do we do that without being accused of interfering in the legitimate political process and without actually doing so?
In freedom of speech, I still believe in even saying stupid things that we can say and hear, right? The countries which are having societies with the critical thinking are those who are reading the most. The best example is Finland and Sweden. And the critical thinking is the weapon that we can defend ourselves. That kind of things are building our resilience to messages from even politicians that are affecting our debate. But I still believe that we do not have right to say or like exclude that kind of politicians. It's the right of people to immunity to that kind of activities and to be wise enough to vote differently.
But briefly, I think we're in what we would call a Kuhnian paradigm shift. For example, people believe the Earth went around the sun. Other way, the sun went around the Earth. Sorry, I'm obviously buying the disinformation. And then eventually there became evidence, and people, really fought against it, and there was the Inquisition and all that. And then people realized, oh, it really is this way. Our revolution is we have to stop the well-meaning studies of, oh, we need more critical thinking, we need to teach analytical skills to kindergartners, and that's all great, that's fantastic. But we're in a crisis moment. We need to figure out how to get to the people who are being affected by disinformation and acting on it. And that's going to take a different skill set, I would say, and different tool set.
My question relates to U.S. or Trump's antipathy to the EU, particularly with respect to Musk now being around. Whether some of this might relate to success of EU regulators with respect to tech giants, which are American companies. It also not only highlights the fact that the EU is actually successfully trying to regulate them. EU has not produced its own giants that the US has failed to regulate. So I just wondered to what extent you think that dynamic holds.
Well, to be fair to Trump, I think he's hated the EU even in his first administration before Musk was, sort of part of his administration. I think the root of it lies in a lot of what you said, right? That the EU is successful at regulating business in a way that Trump wouldn't approve of. But I think it's more that you're always the most jealous of the friend who is most like you, right? So the EU is a powerful economic and democratic bloc. And that's why I think he's very antagonistic to the EU, because they are the democratic competitors to the United States, basically, in his view, which is ridiculous. So instead of thinking them as allies, I swore to myself I wouldn't say ridiculous, but I just did, so whatever. I also apparently don't know whether the Earth revolves around the sun or the sun around the Earth, so that's fine too. So that's all I could say, really, because I haven't studied it, but I agree with you. It's bizarre and not helpful, but...
I have no idea to answer that particular question, why Trump is affecting European Union. But I would say that European Union is the not only democratic but and social and economic power, but definitely regulatory power. Find the problem, we regulate that, or we make institutions or something like this. And it's competitive, right? Because one of the elements of fighting with hate speech and the platforms and how to protect our societies is newly managed the DSA, which is Digital Service Act. The regulatory that countries are now implementing to each country that regulates platforms. And this is something that Musk or other platforms have to pay amounts of money for, like crossing those regulations. And this is a thing that if we will be standing strong to implement a Digital Service Act, that will be block or affect the business that Musk is having. So dividing Europe is making him much more powerful and profitable. Profitable.
This question is for Dr. Legucka. In the US, social media companies are exempt from the liabilities that other media companies are subject to. This is under Section 230 of the Communications Act. And because these social media platforms are considered perpetrators of third-party content, in your experience, is this best practice in governance, or should social media companies be held liable for the content they facilitate?
Great question. So this is from 1996, this law, so it's almost 30 years old now. No, the law doesn't work. The law was made at a time when there really wasn't social media, and the intentions were that the internet worked kind of like the cables that bring you, TV, that it was just a platform, right? And we know that not to be true. So Section 230 is not at all fit for purpose. Unfortunately, I don't think we're in a space where we're going to see like good, rational legislation. And there has been debate. The debate has focused on the same things we talked about in Ukraine, right? Like, where does regulation of, social media fall into censorship? But it doesn't work. It's caused a lot of harm. It's not good legislation for the modern world, and it would be great if it could change. Are we in an era of American governance where we're going to see great, rational internet governance? I don't think so.
You mentioned about Trump presenting no clear vision. Doesn't he do that to the American people when he's talking about the golden age, which sounds like an era of no income tax, government living off duties and tariffs, but the overall message, which is something that's been pounded, especially by the Republican side, is no government in your life and no involvement. And that seems to, however it's done, resonate. I would think that's his underlying vision.
I'm going to go back and make my Trump collage, I think, on the wall of my office, and I think that's a part of it. But the problem is, how long can you sustain that? When the local hospital Medicare facility shuts down and there's no Medicaid payment and there's no disability payment. It's funny because, people have this view of Americans as being, that's there's not a lot of state. The state is everywhere in your life in the United States. Something, I think it's like a third of the population rely on the government for medical care, which is not particularly well known. And this is a weird statement. I just find Putin's strategic narratives a little bit more based in reality than Trump's, and that is a terrifying statement. I think you have a good point. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough. Maybe because I'm not in the mind of the Trump voter, I'm not seeing it. So I need to try a little harder because it might be out there, and if I could figure it out, it'd be helpful.
Because I'm not maybe fully agree with you in the sense that Putin is much more like connected with the reality. The matter is time. Putin is repeating all the things for a long, long time. The messages are contradictory, but when you elaborate the how the narratives are built, like you have like meta narratives, which is that Russia is an exceptional country, and etc. No one can understand Russia, and then you go deep down with the narratives. And then you go to the messages, and messages can contradict to each other. It doesn't matter. So it makes this very big clash. But now when it comes to Trump, I think we are in the process of creating that narrative, strategic narrative. So that's why maybe we much more confused about his strategic narratives, because it's in making. We can see it yet.
The point you make, and it's a great point, is I think his supporters can see it. I don't think me, or feel it, which is even better. So I think that's my next paper. So I can give you a footnote if you give me your name later. I do get the MAGA newsletter every day, which is, every week. It's a scrape of Truth Social that's then run through ChatGPT to summarize. And that's, and anyone can subscribe. It's free. You can come ask me later how to get it. So it's pretty eye-opening.
Time, yeah. Dr. Legucka, Dr. Oates, thank you for really wonderful presentation and for discussion.